welcome to Citizens of the World. As you know, we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is now becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you for joining me each week, your host Al Zucaro, from the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Palm Beach County, for a pointed look at politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. I don't know about you, but I sure am getting very frustrated with the amount of news and the amount of changes and the amount of concerns that are being raised by a lot of the coverage, both national and local, for the election, for the elements of the election, for tax. But immigration is really becoming a real item of concern. What we're going to cover in the early part of today's show is that the USCIS, at the direction of President Obama, or at least the direction of this administration, is employing more and more techniques to implement the immigration efforts to the degree some argue is beyond the dictate of the law. There was recently I think the last couple of days actually, the Daily Caller blog posted a story that argued, or had people in the story arguing, that the president is actually violating the law, and he's doing it from a political point of view in an effort to attract and keep constant contact with the Latino population and with many undocumented aliens who are favorable, more Democratic than they are Republican. Be that what it may, let's examine some of the facts. The Immigration Daily the other day, last week, published an article that said United States USCIS is introducing more employment-related immigration reforms. If you'll remember, a couple of weeks ago, I reported that the Obama administration issued a directive for prosecutorial discretion, which closed hundreds of thousands of cases that were pending in front of immigration judges nationwide, and those people are now not in proceedings and therefore not subject to deportation. I suspect they will soon be given work authorization. Then we published a couple of weeks back, we talked about, and we will continue this subject with Scott DeVore in the next couple of weeks. I'll get him on here, a leading immigration attorney here. We published that the 601 waiver, which generally is conducted outside the country, is now, a memo has been circulated saying that the administration is going to allow for that to be adjudicated in the country, and then if a favorable ruling, it will guarantee a short stay out of the country for those those undocumented aliens who will then exit the country and re-enter pursuant to the 601 waiver. A major shift in how those things get done. Just last week, Immigration Daily published another article that talked about expanding the eligibility for a 17-month extension of OPT, that's optional practical training, to students that are here. Currently, a student is in on an F1 visa. He is allowed to stay for what's known as duration of status, meaning as long as he's a full-time student, defined by carrying 12 credits. And at the end of that period of time, when the student is decreed, he or she is entitled to a practical training period of 1 year period of time. Well, now the administration, without changing the law, it's merely a change in process, is expanding that period to 17 months. It's also allowing part-time study for spouses of F1 students and expands the number of designated school officials at school who are certified by Homeland Security to enroll in international students. It's going to provide work authorization for spouses of H-1B holders. What's an H-1B? An H-1B is a professional who is degreed in a particular area or has experience equivalent to a degree in a particular area and comes here temporarily to perform a service. Now, if that H-1B visa holder is married, the spouse and children are allowed to travel, and children in some cases, but spouse is allowed to travel and remain in the United States. Up until now, there has not been work authorization for the spouse. Now, without change in law, there is the possibility of providing work authorization for the spouse as well. It allows outstanding professors and researchers to present a broader scope of evidence of academic achievement. It harmonizes the rules for E-visa holders from Australia and H-1 visa holders from Singapore. It launches entrepreneurs and residency initiatives. The issue that I think I'm driving at here is that through administrative action, through executive decree, without Congress continuing on the task of comprehensive immigration reform, the president is doing things that are not necessarily being authorized by law, but extending current law to cover areas that may actually not be covered in the law. Some argue this is political in nature. I'll leave that up to you. I'm just reporting it. I'm going to, as you know, we talk about immigration and economic development. So some of the things that I just said are economic development oriented. But I wanted to pick up on the point of motor vehicles, the Department of Motor Vehicles, and on this point about undocumented aliens with the 601 waivers. Recently, there was a task force here in South Florida. The South Florida American Immigration Lawyers Association works in conjunction with the federal government and the local governments to clarify some of the positions that the governments have taken with regards to undocumented and aliens. And one of the things that has come from that is a very strong relationship between the immigration lawyers and the Department of Motor Vehicles. And they are, of course, responsible for issuing driver's licenses. And the big challenge for an undocumented alien to be able to remain here and not be subject to criminal prosecution for driving without a license is to get a license. And as you know, with the exception perhaps of voter ID issues, which we'll talk about later, a driver's license is pretty necessary for almost anything that you want to do. I mean, I get a kick out of driving up to gated communities in South Florida and they ask me to see my driver's license. Like when I'm visiting my friends, I'm a terrorist that's going to cause a problem. But the driver's license is a free pass in most cases. You need it to get on the airplane, you need it to drive a car, you need it to cash a check, you need it for so many other things. Well, in Florida, we have now published a list of acceptable documents that must be presented to the driving examiner before a driver's license will be issued. When I first saw this list last week, I was surprised that it is very extensive. So we're not going to attempt to do it. I'm going to give you a methodology for how to find this out if it really is something that you want to know. But the bottom line is that in order to get a driver's license and you're not a natural one, you have to produce information about who you are and where you were born. So as a U.S. citizen, I can go in there with my birth certificate or with my passport, and I can go in there with a couple of documents that show that I live at the address that I say I live at, and I can get a driver's license. Someone who's here from another country and wants to get a driver's license in the state of Florida has got to go through a similar process, only the documentation becomes a lot more difficult. And this has been challenging over the years because the men and women who work for the Motor Vehicles Department are not experts on immigration law, and even I as an attorney sometimes get confused as to what documents make me eligible for what, or make my clients eligible for what. So recently the Division of Motorist Services at the Department of Motor Vehicles in Tallahassee published a list. And of course, a green card, the permanent resident card, the I-551 card, is an acceptable document. That says that you're a permanent resident. Basically, you can live and work in the United States free of challenge. A stamp in your passport that you are also a permanent resident is applicable. An I-797 for an I-90, which is a document that shows that you are here, is acceptable. An I-797, by the way, is a document that says that you have filed for and immigration has received your application. The I-90 is a replacement permanent resident card. The I-131, also a travel document. The I-751, which is where you're trying to remove the conditions, those are acceptable. An order from an immigration judge is acceptable. The issue is you really need to, when you're trying to get a license and you're an undocumented alien, or you're trying to get a license and you are in some kind of procedure here, in order to get a driver's license, you need to go and get these things unequivocally. The person that heads up that division is a man by the name of T.N. Prakash, Prakash. He works in Tallahassee, and we really need to thank the American Immigration Lawyers Association, 4 lawyers in particular who have worked this up, and those lawyers are Carrie Fonte, Jeff DeVore, Scott DeVore, and Mary Kramer. I've invited Scott DeVore to the show. He has accepted. We're trying to work out an applicable date for him to come and talk about these very issues. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to digest it, because driver's licenses are the de facto identification card in the United States, and they are very effective in ways of keeping people aware of who is around them. I'm going to take a break now. When we come back, we will have part 3 of our real estate section with Tony Macaluso, the international realtor and educator, and his topics have been quite interesting the last couple of weeks. So we'll look forward to Tony joining us. Be right back.
Hey, thank you, Al. It's a wonderful opportunity here again this week to give a little international interlude here. This week I thought I'd talk about something that's just as important as the people that are coming into the United States, but some of our own citizens that are thinking beyond our borders in order to vacation and or potential retirement. Countries like Panama, Costa Rica, Belize, Mexico are finding that our citizens find the cost of living there to be very attractive. If you happen to be a person on a retirement income and you're getting $1,200 or $1,400 a month, you're not going to live very well here in the United States. But you can go to some of these countries, have a nice apartment, a domestic servant, eat well, and spend your golden years in some kind of dignity. And I think people are looking for quality of life as they go into retirement. Just think about this. We have somebody turning 60 every 9 seconds in the United States. These are what we call our baby boomers. One of the things that happened after the war is many of our military personnel coming home took kind of a page out of the 60s where they said, make love, not war, and that's exactly what they did. And so the result was this incredible boom of children that are now coming of age. Last decade, we had somebody turning 50 every 9 seconds. This decade, we have somebody turning 60 every 9 seconds. It's about 78 million people out of our 315 million population. So we have plenty of people that maybe can afford to stay in the United States, even though many of our boomers are very comfortable and will live here into their golden years. In terms of how many people have already gone, we've got about 65,000 U.S. citizens leaving in Panama. We have about 85,000 living in Costa Rica. We have, believe it or not, 1.5 million that have moved down into Mexico, certainly not along the borders where there's a lot of conflict, but further down in the country, and find it to be a nice place with a quality of life that they enjoy. Belize has also had some attraction because it's one of the few countries south of the United States that is an English-speaking country. Incidentally, that's why Panama is attractive as well. You know, for all the years that we ran the Panama Canal, most of the Panamanians had to adapt English as part of a second language. So not only do they speak Spanish, but they also speak English, and pretty much English is being used throughout the entire country, which makes it attractive for our citizens who very often are somewhat language challenged. You know, Panama's also got some real boom times coming ahead of it. They're really cutting a big new canal in. It's supposed to be finished by 2014. This is going to open up all kinds of opportunities here in Florida as well. The ports of West Palm, of Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Tampa, Jacksonville, all thinking about these goods coming in from specific countries that are going to be able to come right into the heart of the United States. You're going to have places like Savannah, New Orleans, also gearing up for the volume of business that's coming in. But when we're talking about boomers, boomers are looking for a couple of things. Number one, they want a place that has a lot of recreation, and they're also concerned about health care. And it's kind of interesting that Johns Hopkins decided to put a hospital in Panama, and conceivably taking U.S. healthcare plans. So we've really paved an opportunity for people to go to pristine countries. I mean, one of their new adventures over the last several years, instead of slashing and burning their tropical forests, they're now doing ecotourism. Nice place to live, good opportunities, price is still very favorable, money trades very well. In fact, in Panama, they use the U.S. dollar. They call it the Balboa, but the fact is, U.S. dollars are traded openly throughout their entire society. So they're a dollar-based economy. Opportunities abound out there, and if you'd like more information about your opportunities, give us a call, portsideproperties.com. Look forward to being with you. Al, let me turn it back to you.
Well, thank you, Tony, and welcome back, folks. I want to go back to an item that we mentioned in Kudos and Chaos last week, and that was about what's going on in Venezuela. Under fireworks and politics, you can only imagine what it must be like to live in the country of Venezuela. We take so much for granted here. Hugo Chavez has been the president there, and some call the dictator there, for a number of years now. And for the first time in a long time, there seems to be a popular uprising, and that uprising has produced, in this presidential election, a serious challenge to Mr. Chavez, and a high voter turnout demonstrating that the people of Venezuela are not particularly happy with the circumstances as they exist. Of course, Mr. Chavez is suffering from serious medical conditions. Some say it's cancer, and he is, of course, not the same person with the same energy and stamina that he's had in the past. But be that what it may, we said last week to keep an eye on what's going on there. Well, this week in one of the brochures, in Latin American news, I received an article that talked about what's happening around the hemisphere, and I thought one item in it should be worthwhile. On February 13th, the Latin American news reports that more than a few supporters of the opposition to Hugo Chavez awoke on February 13th feeling the need to pinch themselves. The result of the open primary election the night before, designed above all to pick a candidate to frustrate Mr. Chavez's bid for re-election in October, exceeded all expectations, and the winner, as widely predicted, was Henrique Capriles, the governor of the state of Miranda. But here's the interesting part. The margin of his victory, and particularly the phenomenal turnout, injected an unprecedented, these are their words, not mine, optimism into the ranks of the Democratic Unity Coalition in Venezuela. What this is saying is that Governor Capriles is leading amongst the opposition and figures to be a major contender for president of the country of Venezuela. I'm going to do a little homework on this over the next couple of weeks and pass an opinion on this gentleman. But the fact of the matter is it almost becomes an anybody but when it comes to Chavez and the way he's treated that country. So onward and upward, and that was my first coverage for fireworks and politics for this week. The next item I want to talk about is an article that the New York Times printed on February 15th of last week. And it's headlined, Report, Voter Rolls Riff with Errors and Inaccuracies. And the reason that I talk about this in terms of fireworks and politics goes back to my comment earlier in the show about driver's licenses. There is a clear opposition on the part of the current administration, the part of the current Attorney General, to dissuade, to coerce, and to legally challenge states that are requiring people to identify themselves when they go to vote, either with an ID card, a picture ID card, or with a driver's license. And the argument is that we're going to make it more difficult for people to vote, and we shouldn't make the franchise of voting more difficult, we should make it more even. Well, this report that was published by the Pew Center talks about this, and it says that 1 in 8 active registrations for voting is either invalid or accurate. And 1 in 4 people who are eligible, at the same time, 1 in 4 people who are eligible to vote, at least 51 million potential voters, are not registered. There is a serious problem here. We have an election of the President of the United States coming. We have a concerted effort to allow people to vote who aren't even voting. I mean, I think that he said the report found that there are about 1.8 million dead people listed as active voters. What's to prevent anyone from picking up that identity and going into a voter's booth and voting, even though they're not that person? And there have been many reports over the last few months since this has become an item that is demonstrating that there are particular places in the country that are under serious challenge with regards to their policies and practices in the voting arena. So I want to say that it is incredible that, there's an interesting statement. In 2008, roughly 2.2 million votes were lost because of registration problems. I mean, it just goes beyond saying that we do not need another circumstance like that happened in Florida back in the year 2000 with the Bush and Gore election. And we do absolutely need the ability to know who's voting, particularly in this very important electoral year here in the United States. Kudos and KOs. A couple of weeks ago we had Jorge Pescara, and then we had Roger Amedin. Both of these gentlemen are gentlemen that sit on top of the pile with regards to tourism in Palm Beach County. Both of them painted a very positive picture and told us some of the facts and statistics that tourism is up, and tourism is always a mainstay, a backbone of the economics of Palm Beach County. Well, following that up, last week there was a coverage called Record Year for Florida Tourism, and it said more visitors flocked to Florida. The increase over 2010 tourism figures, 3% domestic, it was up 3% from domestic locations. It was up 5.7% from Canadian locations and up 16.1% from overseas. Those are statistics provided by Visit Florida. Very impressive, and I think that it speaks to the issue of how the international community is becoming local and aiding to our recovery here in the state of Florida. So I commend that. That deserves a really big kudos. KO. Last week, China comes to the United States. The vice president is greeted by the president and our vice president and tells us basically to mind our own business with regards to human rights violations in China. Basically, they're arguing that we should improve our own relationships and we should take care of our own business and not necessarily worry about what's going on in there because we don't understand their culture. We are interfering in how they control their country. Tell you the truth, I'm not sure that I buy that, so I gave it a kudos. It says human rights disagreements are okay. That's what the Chinese vice president said. Kudu, Honda Classic, ready for the Tiger effect. What does that mean? Tiger Woods, now that he's moved to his house in South Florida, up in Martin County actually, he has committed to playing in two events. One, the Honda Classic, which will take place in the very near future, on March 1st through the 4th, and the other, I believe, is the Doral Open down in the Miami area. Well, the effect of him committing to play in the Honda has caused what people are anticipating an additional 20,000 fans to be coming at $40 a person. So there's like an $800,000 increase in revenues with very little in the way of increased costs, and it's directly attributed to the talent and to the draw of Tiger Woods, regardless of the circumstances. And you know what? He deserves it. He's one of the great players of the game. KO, continuing struggle for the South Florida Theater. The Caldwell Theater, one of the longest running theaters in Palm Beach County, is following up now what seems to be the fate of the Florida Stage Theater, which went bankrupt a few months ago. Apparently, Legacy Bank has filed a foreclosure lawsuit against the Caldwell Theater and arguing that the theater has failed to pay nearly $6 million in debt, etc., etc. Not a good sign for theater. Very bad economic times. So it's not unpredictable, but it is certainly not something that we are enjoying. Finally, a double kudu. I own a Pekingese. I own a little black Pekingese, 12.5 pounds. My wife says that it's the only baggage I brought to our marriage. The Pekingese won, as is now America's top dog. The Pekingese, a 4-year-old by the name of Malachi, a 4-year-old Pekingese, won Best in Show, his personal 115th title overall, but he won the Best in Show at the 136th Annual Westminster Kennel Club Show last Tuesday in New York City. Congratulations, and from your sister in Florida, Coco says congratulations as well. So I want to bring this to close tonight. I want to remind you, I'm Al Zucaro. You can reach me at alzucaro.com. That's www.alzucaro.com. That's my website address. And my email address is al@alzucaro.com. I'm appreciating some of the things that viewers are sending in to me, and we'll be reading some of them in the future. And I want to bring us to a closure by reminding you, we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is now becoming national and international, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you for joining me each week at Citizens of the World from the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Palm Beach County, for a pointed look at politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. Good night now. Good evening, folks, and welcome to another session of Citizens of the World. I'm your host, Al Zucaro, and I want to remind you, we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is now becoming international and global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you for joining me each week, and remind you that you are in the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Palm Beach County, and we enjoy a pointed look at politics, culture, immigration, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. Now tonight I want to start off with an article that was published in the Wall Street Journal, I think maybe a week and a half ago. The title of the article talks about U.S., the United States, sway, meaning our influence, clipped in Latin America. If you'll remember, about 5-6 weeks ago, I did a commentary using the opinions by a Sun Sentinel commentator by the name of Guillermo Martinez, I believe is his name, and he was reporting about all of the influences that Iran is having in the Western Hemisphere. He was also reporting about the president of Iran's trip to Venezuela, to Cuba, and we've also reported on the efforts to start a influencing agency to offset the ability of the Organization of American States and finance some of the needs of the region. My own personal travels have taken me throughout Latin and South America and the Caribbean Basin, and I can tell you that the Chinese are very significantly invested, particularly in the island nations, and they are a major influence in the Western Hemisphere. So what's going on? How come it takes till February of 2012 for us as a community to begin to realize that we are not protecting our own borders? We have a serious national security issue on the rise in the Latin, South American, and Caribbean basin here in the Western Hemisphere, our own backyard. So this article published, the author was a Nicholas Casey, published in the Wall Street Journal, talks about Senator Marco Rubio, of course a Florida senator, our senator from here, who is the ranking member of a Senate subcommittee that oversees the region, and he is now beginning to hold confirmation hearings to talk about this and give the State Department an ultimatum: change some of its key policies or face blocks against some others. Well, if anybody understands the region, it is Senator Rubio, so that is a good thing. The acrimony between the Republicans and the Democrats in Washington, D.C. on what's good and what's bad, that is a bad thing. But in a bipartisan way, in a what's good for our country way, how can one overlook all of the influences of the Chinese and the Iranians in the Western Hemisphere? Some are arguing that we are about to face another missile crisis. I don't know. I just know that we clearly have not kept our finger on the pulse in our own backyard, and we now have a serious problem in the Caribbean Basin and Latin and South America. And so I commend Senator Rubio and look forward to the results of his items. Onward and upward. Under immigration and economic development today, I want to talk a little bit about one of the things I raised over the last few weeks and mentioned on Tuesday's show. And that is the prosecutorial discretion from the Homeland Security. It's finally been published, a position paper on how prosecutors and investigators are to execute their discretion. Okay, it says that the mission of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, is to promote homeland security and public safety through the criminal and civil enforcement of federal laws governing border patrol, border control, customs, trade, and immigration. Now that should make you feel comfortable. Says the primary goals are to prevent terrorism and enhance security, protect the borders against illicit trade, travel, and finance, protect the borders through smart and tough interior immigration enforcement, and construct an efficient, effective agency. That sure makes me comfortable reading the newspapers on a daily basis. It says that the priorities regulating civil immigration enforcement: priority number 1, aliens who pose a danger to national security or a risk to public safety. 2, recent illegal entrants. 3, aliens who are fugitives or otherwise obstruct immigration controls. Then it says the following cases are enforcement priorities. These cases involve aliens, suspected terrorist or national security risk, convicted of a felony or multiple misdemeanors, illegal entry, re-entry, or immigration fraud, or a misdemeanor violation involving violence, sexual abuse, DUI, flights from the scene of an accident, drug distribution or trafficking, or other threats to public safety. Enforcement priorities continued: those who are gang members, human rights violators, those who entered the country illegally or violated the terms of their admission. These are priorities. I thought we stopped chasing this kind of stuff. Who has previously been removed from the country, those found by an immigration officer to have committed immigration fraud, or otherwise has an egregious record of immigration violations. Cases that are not enforcement priorities: those who are members in good standing of the Coast Guard or Armed Forces, have an honorable discharge, those who is a child who has been in the United States for more than 5 years and is either in school or has successfully completed high school. Sounds like the DREAM Act to me. Those who came to the United States under the age of 16, has been in the United States for more than 5 years, has completed high school or its equivalent, and is now pursuing or has successfully completed higher education in the United States. Continuing, those who are over the age of 65, who are victims of domestic violence, who have been a lawful permanent resident for 10 years or more, and has a single minor conviction for nonviolent offense, who suffers from a serious mental or physical condition, who has a very long-term presence in the United States. And then it goes on with special rules for asylum cases, which is a little too deep in the woods, and other kind of special considerations. Point I'm making here is that back in 1986, Immigration Reform and Control took two basic premises. Number one, the underground economy was hurting the above ground economy. And number two, by giving a path to what was then called legalization, subsequently became known as amnesty, you immediately increase your tax base by all of those people that now have the opportunity to have a privilege of remaining in the United States. We have been fighting the issue of comprehensive immigration reform now for way longer than I can even remember. And it still doesn't look like it's on the horizon. But under this administration, with this president, he is moving in the direction of a lot of the things that he's doing from an executive power point of view without the benefit of a comprehensive reform package from Congress. Again, some argue this is political because he's trying to solidify the Hispanic vote. Some argue it's practical because we really have a need to do it. The fact of the matter is that the President and Congress should sit down and get immigration done, and I'm sure it will get done after the election, regardless of who wins the election. So right now, we're going to take a break, and when we come back from the break, you'll see part 4, I believe, from Anthony Macaluso, or Tony Macaluso, with regards to his observations with real estate and with immigration as it affects a real estate provision. And we'll look forward to Tony when we get back.
Thanks, Al. It's great to be back again on our international segment. I think you'd have to be living in a cave these days not to understand that there's some real problems that are effervescing all across Europe, particularly in the Eurozone. The Euro crisis has been precipitated by a number of things, not the least of which is the fact that some of these countries have run extreme deficits, even though we talk about them here in the United States. By contrast, some of these countries have significant problems. For instance, Spain got a 22.9% unemployment rate. Greece, 19.2% unemployed. More than that, in Greece, you got about 20% of their population as retirees, and 30% work for the government itself. Fact is that you got Portugal with another 12.6 or 13.6, excuse me. You've got Italy that compares, and France, and that compares very favorably with the United States at 8.9 and 9.4. So the northern tier, Germany, for instance, when you talk about really good, 5.5% unemployment, Netherlands 4.9, Austria 4.1, Belgium 7.2, Finland 7.2. So the northern tier of Europe is pretty well along in their economies, but they're looking at their southern tier neighbors having an extreme amount of problems, and there's been a lot of hand-wrenching about whether to loan them the money to get them out of a very awkward situation. Now, what does this mean for us? I think it's real opportunities. Wealth doesn't like uncertainty. They like to put their money where they know they can get a return, where they know that they can have opportunities to grow, not to mention the fact that, we're in a country where the political upheaval that goes on, even though we're somewhat in a paralysis today, doesn't necessarily affect the business community. For example, I kind of kid around. In the year 2000, we spent almost a month not knowing who the president was. In other countries, there would be troops on the street and everything else. But the fact is, during that month when we were finally to count the ballots here in Palm Beach County, figuring out who was the winner, the reality is the stock market opened and closed, real estate sold, we had closings, really nothing affected the business community, and I think the rest of the world sees that as a very positive, stable environment. So it is an opportunity for U.S. real estate. There's no question about it. The wealth is secure here, and wealth seeks safety. So the wealthiest people there in many of these countries, and I was talking to one of my Greek friends just the other day, and I was concerned about him. He's a real estate professional over there. He's the head of one of the largest of the associations, the Central and Eastern European Real Estate Network. And he said, don't worry about us. He said, Greek people have a lot of money. It's the government that's broke. And so the wealth in a country doesn't want to stick around when there's going to be some serious problems. I mean, some of the proposals that have been bannered about is taking a 40% cut if you're a government worker, cutting back on people who are already retired on the pensions that they're going to receive. It seems somewhat catastrophic, and it may actually happen that there might be a Euro 1 and a Euro 2. No one seems to know at this point. I can tell you that they're looking at our properties very favorably. When commercial properties here in the United States are actually selling for less than the cost to reproduce them, to build them, that's a real opportunity for some of these folks to take that money that's sitting over in Europe and move it over here. We see the fact that the expectations for them in terms of home purchases, they're buying here at about 40 to 50% off what the highs were in 05 and 06. They think it's all going to come back within the next couple of years. So if you're going to put your money in an investment that you expected to grow, this is the investment opportunity of a lifetime. Get out of the turmoil of what's going on in many of those countries. Come over here, buy some U.S. real estate, see potentially maybe a 40% appreciation in the next several years. This is an opportunity to buy without a doubt. I don't think anybody believes that we're going to be where we are in the future, that prices will come back for two reasons. Number one, our population is growing, and the fact is that the construction costs to reproduce these houses in the future are going to be severely high compared to what they are. So buying one that's existing is going to make perfect sense when it costs way more to build one. The opportunities are there. Anything you might be interested in what's going on in Europe, I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. Just give us a little tap on the web at portsideproperties.com. We'll be happy to accommodate your concerns. For now, this is Tony Macaluso. I'm going to turn it back to Al.
Well, thank you again, Tony. We'll look forward to hearing more from you next week. And welcome back, folks. As you know, I'm Al Zucaro. I'm an immigration attorney here in Palm Beach County, Florida. My website address is www.alzucaro.com. And my email address is al@alzucaro.com. And I very much appreciate the comments that are beginning to come in from the viewers with regards to the contents of the show. Please keep them coming. They help me deliver a better product and understand the value that the community may see in the time that I am on the air. Fireworks and politics, commentary, it's my fun part. There's a billboard on I-95 here in Palm Beach County that really intrigues me. It says, see something, say something. And the purpose of that billboard is to get people who think that they may have seen something bad about a neighbor, a friend, even a stranger, to call and report it and let the police and the authorities sort it out whether or not it is a right or wrong. And there is a certain amount of intrigue with regards to that kind of philosophy, because you don't even, in many respects, have to identify who you are. You just file the report. Well, it led me to a couple of things in the papers over the last couple of weeks that I'm going to try and tie together. One is there was an article about a man by the name of Earl Stewart. Earl Stewart is a very formidable person in Palm Beach County. He owns a number of automobile dealerships. He is a businessman of renown and respect, and he is a philanthropist. He's a community leader and a voice. But apparently he either, an employee of his, this is allegedly, who was let go, was the spouse of a police officer. And the police officer, the North Palm Beach police officer, filed a report allegedly merely to get back at Mr. Stewart for firing his wife from the Toyota dealership. And the report caused Stewart's privileges to drive a car to be placed at risk. And apparently there is a law in the state that allows anyone to do that, if they have a good faith belief that another person is mentally or physically has a disability to drive, they can file the report, and that causes the person who the report is filed against to have to go through a series of tests. It says here that the report was filed under a 36-year-old state law that allows any physician, person, or agency, quote unquote, who believes a licensed driver lacks the physical or mental ability to be behind the wheel to alert the Florida Department of Motor Vehicles. The state agency then requires the driver to be retested. Mr. Stewart, who was 70 years old, says he was required. He passed the driving test with flying colors, but he said it bugged him that someone would report him. He began to suspect who it might be and has filed this lawsuit and moving forward. Good for Mr. Stewart. This is the kind of stuff that is really bad. It leads to vindictive kind of stuff. Well, there is a lot of activity going on here in Palm Beach County with an organization called the Inspector General and the powers that have been given to it because of corruption in the county, and the request that people report things that they see. A couple of weeks ago, I reported the meltdown of the city of Boynton Beach, Florida. This week I want to criticize or want to report on the city of West Palm Beach, Florida, which seems to be going through a similar meltdown. Last week there was a major argument that took place in a closed meeting, one, without a public record being created against the law, two, and with a city councilman accusing the auditor, the internal auditor of the city of West Palm Beach, of leaking a story that had ramifications to him and got in her face because of it. And now there's follow-up. There has been argument or accusation that people that work for the city of West Palm Beach fear reporting when they see or believe things are being done because of retaliation and for fear of losing their job. Well, the mayor in a meeting apparently got a little hot under the collar and said that that was not done. The incident that she was talking about was an approval given by city staff to a homeowner association inside the Ibis community, where the mayor happens to live, to cut down 28 oak trees when there was no apparent reason to cut them down except for aesthetics and the desire to replace them with palm trees, and when a previous official for the city of West Palm Beach denied the request in the past, stating in internal memos that there was no apparent damage being done by the oak trees to the infrastructure, the sidewalks, the utility lines, etc., etc. Well, that ensued, that caused an internal investigation as to how anybody found out about this, and that caused a person to be put on a last chance status because they were found to be the person that released the internal emails, etc., to the inquiring public, even though the materials that were released are part of the public record and available through any kind of a record search if you wanted them. Point I'm making, the city of West Palm Beach is seemingly getting out of control as well. Its internals are being challenged. Its internal auditor is being challenged. There's a lot of acrimony going on. This closed meeting question raises a lot of, and the audit committee, one of its members quit and called the city corrupt in a public statement. I think the city of West Palm Beach needs to rein itself in, and my personal interest in that is I was a former commissioner, and although we had fights with the then mayor, Nancy Graham, there was an honest and healthy respect for the city charter, and maybe that doesn't exist anymore, but maybe I'm too far away from it to be commenting. At any rate, that's my fireworks and politics number one. Fireworks and politics number two. I don't know if the camera can pick this up, but there's a picture here, and I'm holding in my hands, from a newspaper article of last week that shows a Republican and a Democrat shaking hands in what appears to be some kind of jubilant celebration because the lawmakers signed off on the payroll tax bill. Well, I have to tell you, if that's what gets their jollies off, then they are nothing but a bunch of baboons. They need to go home. The fact of the matter is that why would anybody be jubilant about signing a bill that is unpaid for, that is putting the Social Security system at risk, and that is simply political expediency for both sides of the aisle? The Democrats and the president, one side want to claim victory for, they keep saying that 160 million people will lose $20 a week, blah, 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 blah. And the Republicans on the other side want to avoid the stigma of looking like Uncle Scrooge and losing in the upcoming election. There is absolutely no integrity in the positions that these lawmakers are taking. It makes me as a citizen want to just not even try to stick within the rules because they don't stick within the rules. It's no wonder that there is a tremendous acrimony in the country. Now, on to kudos and KOs. Boca Raton Museum, fabulous. You need to go see it, folks. Deserving. They recently won a major award. They have a modern photographers exhibit going on now. And this weekend past, they did their ball, their yearly ball fundraiser. My wife and I were there. They had a very unique opportunity to allow young people to take recycled materials and create fashions, female fashions for them. It was one of the most unique fundraisers that I've been to in a long time. KO, Harry Reid. Harry Reid's solar solution. I have to read this to you folks. Sorry for the political commentary, but this stuff drives me nuts. This comes from a viewer. The Tonopah Solar Company in Harry Reid's Nevada is getting a $737 million loan from the Department of Energy. The project will produce 110 megawatt power system and employs 45 permanent workers. The cost to taxpayers, $16 million per job. One of the investment partners in the endeavor is Pacific Corporation Group. The PCG executive is Ron Pelosi, who just happens to be the brother of Nancy Pelosi, or Nancy Pelosi's husband. Don't ask any questions. Just move along, folks. Nothing but crooks going on up there. Opinion of the reader who sent this in. But it's incredible that we continue to find these things out as to where taxpayers' money are going and who's making these decisions. Kudu, Florida Highway Patrol cracks down on aggressive driving. After the report that came out last week, I think we commented on, that cops in their off-duty, when they're off-duty using official cars and using the transponders that they're giving for getting past toll booths, have been clocked at traveling at 90, 100, and 100 plus miles an hour. The troopers are finally beginning to crack down on it. There is a serious acrimony between the Florida Highway Patrol and the local cops with regards to this. But at any rate, the campaign will take place on February 27th through the 29th, where FHP will be looking for aggressive drivers. I must tell you that when driving to the studio today, I was coming up I-95, and there were at least 7 highway patrol cars there with people pulled over. So they must be moving it up and moving it quickly. KO. Is it any, on that last thing, there was an article by Michael Mayo in the Sun Sentinel and his commentary, and basically he said that he was going to, he says the moral of the story: 1, don't speed more than what would be acceptable to you by citizens you issue traffic tickets to, and 2, return your debt-issued transponders and pay your own tolls. It's a tax write-off. But what I really got a kick of is Mr. Mayo said that he was going to start taking mass transportation because he wondered what kind of bounty there would be on the head of a reward to the cop who pulls over a newspaper reporter for reporting these stories. I thought that was pretty cute. KO. Is it any surprise with this administration, with its misstatements, maybe even its lies, and coming out of Chicago, to find out that Chicago leads the nation in corruption? Little item that appeared in the paper the other day. It says the Chicago area logged the most public corruption convictions of any federal jurisdiction in the United States during the past 36 years. Thank you, Mr. President. Did you come from Chicago? Oh, yeah, I think you did. And finally, a double kudu, the Palm Beach Kennel Club. It's hosting the largest guaranteed World Series of Poker circuit event with a $1 million guarantee in prize money. And that will be taking place, that starts on February 25th. The main event, which starts on February 25th. And the Kennel Club is doing some really significant things, moving forward with making Palm Beach County a destination for world-class poker players. I thoroughly enjoy the game, so I'm glad for that. At any rate, that brings us to a close tonight. Next week we'll have further guests. We look forward to it. Remember, Al at alzucaro.com and www.alzucaro.com. And we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you for joining me each week at the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Palm Beach County, for a pointed look at immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world.